Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And with me today is my guest, Ed the Pagan. Hi,
And I'm
Ed.
in chilly Chicago.
Yes.
Um,
And we're going to talk about your upcoming class on Pagan Power, and that is going to be um, a 3-week class on March 9th, 16th, and 23rd at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 Eastern Time at pagan.world/pagan-power.
hmm
And it is available to supporters of Pagan World. It is available by invitation. It is available to members of my Patreon by special arrangement. And what do you mean by Pagan Power?
First, let me identify. It's a course. It's three
Yes.
classes in a course. And each of the classes are going to be 90 minutes. And they're going to have a discussion, a workshop, a little bit of a workshop exercise, as well as some questions and answers. And it's not dedicated to 90 minutes, 90 minutes of instruction, and possibly a lot of discussion afterward. Because what is pagan power? Well, the problem is what is power? And let's get down to what magic is. And we talk about words, we talk
Hmm.
about language, and the word power is one of the most difficult words we're managing right now. It's almost as the word as duck. Let's go ahead and autocorrect language because Facebook and all of them are being super sensitive today under attack of deep fakes. Today is probably the first of the AI wars we're going to see. There are several components because today is a highly election day. They're intruding into our systems. They're also intruding into Israel and also into the Ukraine systems. Are being bolted upon. We're
Hmm.
kind of in a cyber mess, and so also Google's having difficulty today. It's called an intrusion event, and if you look in security methods, we're in the middle of an intrusion event. So that's power protecting yourself. How did you feel when the Meta didn't answer your call? You thought maybe you were hacked, right? Wasn't
A
that your
lot of
first
people seem to
reaction?
have thought that.
How about your account was stolen? For me, when I was cut out, I had two email addresses. When I then suddenly one of them disappeared, they're like, "Oh my god, they got in through a back door." Which go check your Facebook. So they took it off. I mean, like, okay. So I, like all of you, had all this like, "Oh my god, I'm being personally assaulted," even if it was
Hmm.
impersonal. That's power over you. Let me show you that's influence. You were worried about being disconnected from the hive mind.
Yep.
And that is a war tactic. It's a tactic against civilians. I mean, so when you talk about pagan power, what is it that makes us conscious? What makes us pagan? We saw the failure of we saw both the glory of pagan power and the losses when we saw what happened in Salem, Massachusetts, or into England, when
Hmm.
the very circle itself got penetrated by a cross. The circles were raped by Christian protesters, people who didn't want us,
Hmm.
not protesters, terrorists. They were terrorizing us. The same
Hmm.
way of a lynch mob. Carrying a cross into the middle of the circle on October 31st, 2019, on one of the more projected individuals where everybody's on Facebook, is a public rape. So the pagan power wasn't able to prevent it, but the gathering of hundreds of people was. What's pagan power? Pagan power is our right to be pagans. How much power do we have the right to be pagans? And more importantly, how much of a right to live as a pagan? What is pagan power?
Hmm.
How to live as a pagan?
We want to say hello to Janet and Nikki in the chat room and everybody watching.
hmm Okay, we'll put the overlay on. There you go. And so the next question will come up with the overlay. But and also Janet was. Let me show this one. She was saying that's the thing. I'd been hacked. Hmm.
Hmm. Hello to Antonio and Mary.
Right. So yes, that's exactly the feeling it was meant to do it. So that's what makes it an assault.
Hmm.
And the outage. They call it an outage. Everything is an outage. But yeah, that's why they call it an assault. That's
Hmm.
why it's an assault. Because it's meant to make you feel powerless. If you were hacked, if everything else, you'd have to go, what do I need to retrieve it? How do I have to be defensive? But it makes you feel like less power. So
Yeah.
that's why Pagan World is important. What if Facebook went down? Hi, Mary. What if and thank you for talking last time. Well, what if power did go down?
And
Hmm?
hello to Elle and Renee.
Yeah. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean that is a very important question. It's a question that I believe you've spoken to a number of times over the years. How important it is not to be completely dependent on outside sources
hmm
because they can go down so easily. And hello to Joanne. And Joanne asks, when are the classes? And if we can give that information again.
Saturday. We make it nice and simple. Saturday at 10 p.m. for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah,
This Saturday and for the next 3 weeks. And they will also be recorded, so anyone who has a right to see them in the first place will be able to see them afterward.
and that's 10 a.m. Central Time, yes?
Central Time.
Yes.
Our good for Orlando and 10 p.m. in the Philippines.
Yes.
Uh, um, and then beyond that, what is it? So it is 7 hours, and our friend Chris Copeland will have it there at approximately 5 in the evening for Europeans. I really did try to think of a time that covered most of our people.
Well, it's important to say you're not just talking to a U.S. audience. You're talking to pagans around the world. You're talking about the concept of power. And
Right.
hello to Rebecca Ann and Christine.
What do you mean just poo poo? There we go. Just
No,
pop.
just popping in.
No. Rebecca Anna said just poo poo. Poo poo.
I think it was autocorrect
Oh, okay.
because she rephrased it as just popping in from work.
Oh, okay. Well, I agree
Yeah.
that it's somewhat is poo poo, but this one's a very important thing. So, what is power? What is this course going to do for you? That's the question everybody's going to ask. Well, there's another one we'll get into in a bit, but what is it going to give to you? Well, I've been doing this for a very long time. This is my life's work.
Hmm.
Once I left the Christian church, and even while I was in the Christian church, studying pagans, not paganism, but pagans, has been an essential part of my life.
Well, I mean, you were my principal political advisor for 30 years. We did all sorts of things during that time that your insights really helped me to navigate the political world. It
Hmm
there's so many things if you don't come from a certain background, you don't understand. You don't suspect them until they're pointed out to you. And although I was raised with a certain amount of political awareness, there were a lot of things I didn't understand that your background helped me to understand.
Oh, I kind of agree with you on that. And actually, I'm dead center in this fight. I'm just on the pagan side. You would not want me on the Christian side.
No.
And I came close being there,
Hmm.
to being there. Um, but I've studied pagans for a long time, and one of the things is so we built a Corellian church. Don and I have been partners in this. I've been advised
Hmm.
things like that. But I've always been in second command because I've never controlled the message. People don't understand that. I
Hmm.
control people's messages. You know, you're allowed to put out whatever message you want, and I will create platforms behind it
Hmm.
to get it out into the world. And from building platforms, the architecture of cyberspace, the architecture of social networking, as a religious engineer,
Yes.
that's what I am, a religious engineer. I'm going to be able to show you these methodologies that we are using now. And
Well,
so,
I first met Ed because I made a prayer to the goddess to show me what Christians had that we don't, what they knew that we don't. And presently, Edward showed up in my life with a background where he had been trained in all these things and understood
mhm.
what they were doing and why they were doing it. And it was things that were totally new to me because it was just not part of my background. But
So,
so many things made sense once I understood why certain things were done in certain ways.
oh sure, I was born as a dominionist. I mean,
Hmm.
more or less, my pastor Ray Bakke, one of the great evangelicals of the city evangelism. I was in his first church, and I was raised as a evangelical dominionist,
Hmm.
while simultaneously going every Saturday to Catholic church, to mass, and some Sundays, a few Sundays out of the year, but certainly there. And I was indoctrinated. Moody Bible Institute's a whole 9 yards. Of course, I was. And one of the reasons why here's a story most people don't know. show you about power. My pastor, Ray Baki, I loved his sermon on Halloween. I just did. He told us about the Ouija boards, and he told us all the different ways that witches were penetrating into society. Ouija boards, television shows. He hated Bewitched. He hated I Dream of Jeannie because they said this all made it easier for people to accept that magic wasn't evil.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was practicable. That Jesus, and he was of a belief that Jesus banished magic from the world. That was his answer to it. It didn't catch on, but he wanted to say to us that magic didn't exist anymore. And that has been the goal of the dominionists, of the scientists, of everyone else to say magic doesn't exist. And my pastor added a word that made it very powerful. And let's talk about power. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
words. If I told you magic didn't exist, I'm giving you a choice, yes or no. And you can say, no, I believe magic exists. It either existed once or it doesn't matter. It exists.
Mm-hmm.
Or it doesn't. Remember, that's the first evangel. It's called framing, giving you only
Mm-hmm.
one answer to questions. Today's election, Democrats versus Republican, left wing, right wing. We're not being given multiple choices.
Mm-hmm.
Framing is a key word of how you control methodology. So he said, magic doesn't exist anymore. What? What do you mean? It once existed. Jesus lived in a time of magic. But his redemption, his energy is driving magic out of the world. And that's what he took to as a missionary to others' places. Accepting Jesus and pushing Jesus into your community pushes the wishes and all the bad influences out of their circles. He was very successful at that. He helped build mega churches with that
Mm-hmm.
framework. So that's what it is. Magic doesn't exist. Magic exists. Magic doesn't exist anymore.
That's a very good point about how you frame the question can limit the answers people make, unless they have agile minds and don't allow themselves to be framed.
Mm-hmm.
But usually people do.
So what I'm teaching in Pagan Power is how we frame things and how to unframe things and reframe things. I think one of the greatest powers that I teach, and I think Don has been, Reverend Don, I think has been exceptional at it. When we started the Correllian Renaissance
Mm-hmm.
with computers and all of that, we just really had high priest and priest and priest and priestess as pretty much the titles.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And today, we created through the process of building status, building energy, building magic, having more people involved, naming.
Mm-hmm.
And naming is do you have the ability to name something into existence? That's powerful magic.
Absolutely.
And we named ourselves and talked to ourselves and did the work to get from being barely even recognized at the parliament. Well, like Corellians weren't recognized at the first parliament at all, except through my own embodiment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody heard of Corellian in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1893, we know that they attended.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Corellians have had a presence there. But now in 2023, we're standing on the main stage. We were interacting with the world powers. We were actually there. In a period of 30 years, we have names like Most Reverend, and we have this huge hierarchy that we created. And that was through the process of naming, because people like structures. They like to know where they're standing. That's status. I will explain that in deep detail.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the greatest powers pagans names. And from a Christian evangelical point of view, it's a power that God gave Adam.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to frame it, he says, "What do you mean? I have the power from God. I mean, Adam. Adam's first power was naming everything, and by how he named it, in other words, how he used his words, would frame his entire world."
And this again speaks to the importance of framing,
Mm-hmm.
both in terms of being able to do it and not allowing yourself to be subject to it when it's not in your interest.
Yeah,
we want to
I
say
mean,
hello to Himani in the chat room, who has a psychic question, which we do not do here.
nope.
But on Thursdays on Divination TV, which also shows on this same channel, There is a full evening of psychic questions with Reverend Mary that you can ask that question all evening long.
Yeah. And there's a lot of great shows going on there. Actually,
Oh yeah.
you want to talk about something that I predicted a year ago would happen, and now it's a great deal of power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's decentralizing like I hoped it would. People misunderstand why I start things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for me to be in control, but it's for me to inspire and get others to do the same thing because the space is so large. I can't do it alone, and I don't want to be a cult leader.
Well, you've always been about the beneficial transformation of the world, not just what you do yourself, but helping the entire community to move forward.
I think so. Now it's television, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Hello to Joanne.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, currently,
Right.
pagan themed television is expanding everywhere.
You
It's
have
quite
Spiral
amazing.
Moon
Mm-hmm.
by Janet Hallahan. You have Witchcraft TV, which is Harold. And remember, way back in Florida, when I went to Harold, I said, "You want a position in television? I think you're the guy who did it."
Mm-hmm.
I went up to him
Yeah.
before he was involved with any of this, before he even knew it existed, and offered him a job.
Mm-hmm.
And
And of
now
course,
he's
we have Corellian TV, which is formerly
yeah.
Magic TV. We have Divination TV. We have Pagan TV.
Hmm.
All kinds of things. And Christine is saying that she's only just arrived and did not get the info on the class. Can we repeat it, please?
It's on the bottom.
Yeah, the address is on the bottom, pagan-world/pagan
And Saturday at
power.
10 o'clock is the first one. It'll be taped there.
Yeah. And
I
each
decided
Saturday thereafter for 3
right
weeks.
for 3 weeks, and in it, I'm going to just talk about the what of power.
Hmm.
I don't think most pagans realize how much power they have.
Well, one interesting thing, um, a lot of pagans are afraid of the word power. It's a shadow subject to them. But when we actually look at what power is, it's simply the ability to get things done.
I've been detailing into this deeper and deeper. Not just pagans. Let's not
Well, yeah.
pinpoint a pagan, but anyone who's an oppressed person has been taught to disdain power. And you disdain power for 3 reasons. One makes you a bad person.
Hmm.
Bad people use power. No, good people use power too. And I'll talk to that. When you turn on your stove and you get your electrical energy out of there or your gas heat fire out of there, that's power.
Hmm.
Power is the movement of energy in our universe, period. And we frame that in so many different ways. If you believe, um, so they go out there, sell a lot of books out there, Rebecca. Remember, if you have to visualize it, the more you visualize, the more you sell. Is that you basically everything from the Big Bang, if you believe in the Big Bang, accept that, or the movement of that thought of the Big Bang through our society, both represent change. Power is simply the energy of change in motion. Every time you breathe, that's power. There's all sorts of different chemical powers by some analysis. There's over 750 definitions of power.
Hmm.
But we tend to focus on the ones that are human. Okay? We tend to think of our own personal status game, the infinite game by Simon Sinek that I play. I'm a big believer in that. I've studied a lot of this. Toffler. We're going to talk about Toffler. Green. Sun Tzu. I've studied all this. And people ask me all the time, why am I not as powerful? Why am I not more powerful? I'm as powerful as I want to be.
Hmm.
Because people who don't like power don't like the responsibility. But more importantly, they love the authority. Oh, I've learned that. But they don't like the responsibility. They don't like to be in center. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be heard. They don't want to be held accountable. It's easier to be a follower when you don't feel you have to be held accountable. Now, we've tried to remove that from our systems.
Hmm.
And people do blame the followers for the leadership. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I became independent. This is why I spent the last year, really moving to allow me to have a better voice, to get into more things, to have less authority. I had to give away authority because when you have authority, You have a lot more power.
Mm.
Power and authority are two separate things. You'll learn that too.
No, that's very true.
Hmm. I guess, but why do you want to take it? So I'm going to teach you to be less afraid of power. At the end of this, you'll have exercise to be less afraid of power, more able to do things. And if you are in business or if you're anybody, I've advised businesses into the multi-millions.
Hmm.
I may look like a poor priest most of the time, but I certainly have. I have friends who've bought in Bitcoin when it was
Hmm.
thousands. Where I should have bought some. I mean, we knew about Bitcoin from the beginning. We just ignored it. Alice, I'm like Alice. I give very good advice, and sometimes I will listen. But the way the movement money, but 2 years ago, I said TV was going to take on. We're going to do that. We built worldwide systems, the largest Wiccan tradition in the world.
Hmm.
I've helped businesses grow. I've helped businesses, very small businesses, grow their stock. I mean, so I've done a lot of things to move the world into personal power, and this is a kind of a quantification of that.
Oh, and hello to Serebony in the chat room.
Hmm. And so that's a lot of what it is. So pagan power is a lot more about has to do with influence, our power over magic, the mind power over mind, over spirit. Churchill said the next great empires will be of the mind. We're in the middle of that mind war. We are definitely involved with a highly sophisticated conflict of emotional, mental energies that are setting the world. Hmm?
Hmm. And hello to Melanie in the chat
Hi,
room.
Melanie. So let's be honest about that. Who's one of the most powerful women in the world today? The millennial Oprah, a musician.
Yep.
Taylor Swift. She's moving the world, and she's doing it through music, but she's also doing it through kindness and the way she organizes her life.
Absolutely.
And she's being attacked for it.
Yep.
But she has the power to give food money. She's done everything she can from music, her song, because that's a power. And the power she has is to actually make people feel.
Yes.
Pagans have a lot of that power. That's the power we have. We talk about love and light and following and doing things. We don't have to be dirty and nasty. No, we have people who are dirty and nasty, and I've done some amazingly difficult things, and I will talk about that in the class.
Hmm.
Hmm?
Yeah.
But yeah, power is, so music, you always hear music is power. And if you get the right tone, the right beat, the right song, the right moment, it just escalates.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if you just change one person or 100 people.
Yeah.
Melanie Silver has done a great job. Well, lady Melanie Silver in charge of a group called Panthea, and there's a story in there about Hal's story, a man with
Yes.
two hearts, about a heart transplant and being on the machine and really there, and he did a lot of good after that. That was a very inspirational, powerful story that moved us.
Hmm. I remember that.
Our core my core has been I am not trying to learn about paganism. People always say that. When we built the Carolian Church, Don was in charge of the message. Everybody else was in charge of the message. I'm just after building systems. I enjoy that. I'm an engineer, emotional cybernetic engineer of these things. And I think the
Hmm.
community needs to know more about what's happening because I think we're getting into a really dark place. Again, let me jump back to the meta attack. What was your first thought? Hacked, right? Fuck, I was hacked. Hmm? Right?
Many people thought that. Yeah.
Or somebody stole my account. I had a much darker piece. I thought somebody got in through a back door and was trying to take it because my account isn't like your account. Well, some of you might be. But let me be honest, my account controls over 30 different pages we use every day to communicate.
Yep.
Yes, my account isn't necessarily like everybody. It has a great deal of power in it. And if I
Hmm.
were to lose that, I use it to build new businesses. I just recently helped it to help, the transformation of Pagan World TV into multiple stations and then allow that to kind of bring back. I allow, so there are all sorts of people doing all sorts of things now that I broke some of it up.
Hmm.
but I have over 30 pages that I control. And not just like 100, 200, 500. I have those. But I have 1,000, 8,000. I just lost one this week to the original owner, which they would have told me. That's power too.
Yeah.
That's the dark side of power. I'm going to definitely talk about that event because it stabbed so recently. And we're going to talk about what is power.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go into whys the second week. And of course, it'll have some of the what and whys in each. And then how to utilize power. You
Very
have more
good.
power than you think, and you have less power than you know. Because every time we have one of these events, and let me tell you, we are having our own shooting event. At least people aren't dying in it, but we're having our own version of that. You want to talk about power?
Mm-hmm.
Every time we have Christians attacking us, recently it was the Corellian tradition and a politician,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We all get outraged. We send our letters, and the more effective one, the rabbi, oh my God, he just walked into it. We walk into it, we get really angry, we get really outraged, we get stories, we're pushing these stories out, we're doing better and better job of pushing the story out.
Yeah.
And then the story fades fast. Oh yeah, and we send our thoughts and prayers. What are we doing about the next one?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing everybody's doing now with all these other sorts of incidents. And it sets up the reoccurring and numeric and continuous attack. There is the one that happened in New York, Witch Fest, where they the police did not stop them, even if they had a permit in every legal part. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So even having the law on your side, we saw it in Nashville, not as violent. Just kind of screaming at it. We've seen it now in Salem where it was violent. We saw it in England recently where it was violent. We had this violent talk trying to out a teacher, a person,
Mm-hmm.
in a district by calling them Satanists and then calling all of us Satanists.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been corrected. He hasn't done anything. And we just kind of let it go by. Now, he's still out there creating this base against us, and Corellians in particular.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, he's building it against us because he gets power from it. All these things are power. I like that, Christine. Hi, Steve Taylor. So often people want to see dirty or nasty when it's different. I think it's because people fear what's different. Of course they do. So the one thing that I'm going to tell you is that we are fearful of change, truly fearful of change, because change means a change of status, change of resources, change of material. Our bodies only want one thing: to be pleasured and comforted. That's it. We avoid pain and pursue pleasure. And everything else in the world is around that premise for humans.
Yes.
And for most animals too. And we build up from there. So we don't want change. Why would you want to change that takes you out of being comfortable and pleasured? And if you want to see the most perfect, the Purwa people, they just said they have a language of 343 words. They have no words for time or numbers or colors. They use their memory and relationships to speak in a very different way. But people have gone there, they have none of that. They just live in a perpetual now. So everything else is unnecessary. They live in their forest. They live, there's 800 of them. But there are now only 800 of them.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of it. You don't need much power to live. It takes a lot of energy to run your brain. 20% of your body's power goes to work your brain. So we don't need all of this fancy stuff. The Pua people prove it to us. And if we were to go say, hey, we want to do that, we could start shedding. I mean, there's a pagan movement that I've been seeing among some Seers that may catch. It's called renativizing. And they're talking about they go and lose knowledge. They're talking about becoming knowledge deniers in order to pick up knowledge of nature to go live back as the ancient primitive tribes.
Alrighty then.
And I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to grow. If you're a true pagan, that's a very important part. I mean, is that what people want? They've been talking about it. Do they want to give up technology? That's a perfectly good answer. And you wouldn't have had to worry about today's meta event. You wouldn't have had that energy, that contact. So if you want to send it, all of this Saturday, that's it. Start.
Yes. Let's give the information for the class again, because we've come to the end of our half hour. And you can see the address at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, it's pagan.world/Pagan Power. Explains it all there. Come any number of Facebooks pages that you're out there. Go to pagan.world. It's right there. It's in the events pages. There's a lot of things. But what you need to know is 10 o'clock. Become a supporting member. Help us out. And at 10 o'clock on Saturday, the understanding of Pagan Power will change, because I will name certain aspects of it, and certain people will hear it. And for a lot of people, it may not change. Do you want to be a part of the next wave of change? This course will offer you a way to do so in a way nothing else I know I can do will. Blessings.
Very good. Thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of our half hour, so let us close with our prayer as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we ask you to continue to be with us and guide us as we go forward. Help us to understand the ways of the world and to find our way through the world in the most successful manners. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks, knowing you are always with us. Still, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always. And I'll be back tomorrow when my guest will be Chris Copeland, and we'll be talking about the newest things at Corellian Publishing.